Well, hello there. You got a Jolly Frost flavor in mind today?
Hi, Jimmy. Mr. Vlad?
Who can take your heart out? Chop it up for you. Lock you in his freezer so his contract can renew. The Ice Cream Man. Oh God, guys, don't ever make me sing again. On the plus side, we have a new season of Sabrina, and I know it's technically part 3, not season 3, but I just know some Melvin in the comments is gonna be correcting me. That being said, we have a ton of stuff to explain. This season was absolutely bonkers, so if you haven't subscribed yet and smashed that like button, you might as well be sacrificed to the Green Man. In this video, we'll be going over the entire ending, unanswered questions, and what could be in store for season 4. So if you want to skip right ahead to the seasons 4 stuff, I've left a link in the description below. But if you do, you'll be missing out on Chain Shirtless Nick, Shower Shirtless Nick, Other Chain Shirtless Nick. Now let's get into it. The beginning of the last episode is super important, mainly because it depicts what happened to Sabrina after being backstabbed by Hot Prince of Hell, Caliban. If you look closely here, you can see Ambrose's hands, and that this book is being read by him in the Kinkle Mines, where we'll later find he's found refuge. With Sabrina, Lucifer, and Lilith all confined and stoned in the 9th Ring of Hell, Caliban began his quest to take over Earth to make it the 10th Ring of Hell. What Caliban didn't expect were the pagans, who have harnessed the power of the Green Man, and they were actually able to push him back. And if things couldn't get any worse for our claymate, Hell was attacked by the Celestials, heavenly creatures, and completely emptied. So basically Caliban was like the worst ruler ever, and the world has gone to hell. Wait, no, not hell, you know what I mean. Decades pass until Stone Sabrina is saved by... Yes, I'm gonna call this one Future Sabrina, who has harnessed the power of time and tasked current Sabrina with saving the world and stopping this time loop for good. But how is she to do this? Only by collecting the unholy regalia, 3 pieces of immense magical energy, can she have enough power to travel back in time and stop the pagans. But before she can grab the regalia, she's stopped by its guardians. Vlad the Impaler, a real-life ruler of Romania in the 1400s who Bram Stoker famously turned into a vampire in his 1897 book, Dracula, which, by the way, if you haven't seen my video on Dracula, check it out. He watches over Judas's 30 pieces of silver, which is the amount of silver Judas received for betraying Jesus. There's even a legend hinted at in the show that Judas was the first vampire, and Vlad even says Judas was his father. There's also King Herod, a real king who ordered the slaughter of 14,000 male children under the age of 2 when it was believed that one of them would grow up to be the true king referring to Christ. And finally, Pontius Pilate's bull, the Roman who ordered Jesus' death and famously washed his hands of any wrongdoing, leaving the blame to the Jewish establishment who wanted him dead since his claim of being the Son of God didn't sit well with them. Instead of stopping Sabrina, the 3 guardians join her. Their purpose was to protect these items for this moment, for someone to come along and restore balance to the worlds of heaven, hell, and earth. Sabrina teleports home, and it isn't a pretty sight. Decades have passed, and we're treated with a parade of skeletons. Agatha and Prudence, Zelda and the voodoo priestess Marie, and even Hilda and Salem. Bonus points if you caught Sabrina picking up that jar that holds Batabat, the sleep demon from episode 5, which will later be used by Sabrina to trap Faustus Blackwood. But Sabrina's trip down morbid memory lane is cut short by these creatures. Sabrina also visits Baxter High, which has been overrun with snakes.
Why did it have to be snakes?
This is a reference to one of the pagans, the Gorgon, or the snake charmer who Harvey's dad. Even stranger is the writing on the chalkboard that reads, "Please Lord, deliver us from Carcosa," which refers to an 1895 short story, The King in Yellow, which mentions a city named Carcosa, a mysterious, ancient, and cursed place, just like Greendale. At the carnival, Sabrina sees the bodies of her friends and the feeding of the Green Man with fresh human blood. After reuniting with Ambrose, who, by the way, still looks his normal self even though decades have passed, since witches and warlocks age differently differently than mortals. Sabrina is told that humans have been sent off to flesh factories where their blood is harvested for the Green Man, one of the oldest, if not oldest god, which the pagans brought back to life. Ambrose has holed himself up at the Kinkle mines where he's done nothing but research, having also spent several decades gone completely mad. They figure out that the only way to stop this future from happening is if Sabrina goes back in time and stops the pagans from coming to power. But in order to harness the power of this egg, which holds the ability to manipulate time, unimaginable magic will be needed. Thankfully, Sabrina has the unholy regalia which Ambrose forges into a Morning Star weapon. Ironic since Morning Star is Sabrina's hellish last name. The only problem is that in order to perform the ritual, they'll need a sacred stone circle to perform it, and the only one that's still around is at the academy where Faustus Blackwood holds sway. To make matters worse, Blackwood was given the Mark of Cain by Lilith, essentially making him unkillable. The Mark of Cain originates from the Bible, where it said God gave Cain this mark which promised him divine protection from premature death. To circumvent this, Sabrina makes a deal with Batabat. Sabrina will set her free if she agrees to never bother the Spellmans again. So Batabat is unleashed on Faustus, who puts him in a dream. This allows Sabrina to create a vortex using the Morning Star and travel back in time moments before shit hits the fan. She teleports everyone to safety so a new plan can be hatched. At the same time, Zelda is awoken from her unconscious state after being shot by Miss Wardwell at the end of episode 6. Faustus, posing as a priest, implanted in Wardwell's mind that the Spellmans were responsible for the death of her true love, Adam. Now she wants revenge. What a great Christian. While unconscious, Zelda experiences visions of the past, present, and future, which all make references to the moon. That's why when she comes back to consciousness, she proclaims she knows how to get their powers back to stop the pagans. The answer? The Moon God Hecate. Dating back to ancient Greece, Hecate was the goddess of magic, witchcraft, the night, moon, ghosts, and necromancy. Fitting since necromancy will be needed to save Hilda. Hilda was killed by Zelda and put in the Cane Pit to be resurrected, but it never happened. Likely because the powers the witches once held, a result of worshipping Lucifer, have since been depleted. Now that they worship Hecate, they are imbued with new power, enough to fight the pagans. Speaking of the pagans, they've arranged free admission, caramel apples, and rides at their carnival, all an elaborate plan to implant seeds via the apples so that when the Green Man is finally restored, he can pollinate the townspeople. Sabrina and the gang decide to put a sleeping lullaby on the residents while Robin gives the pagans the last piece of their puzzle, a virgin in the form of Mary Wardwell. With everything in place, the pagans begin their ritual only to be tricked. Miss Wardwell isn't Wardwell at all. It's a plague maiden known as Pesta, with the ability to rot organic material. The witches reveal themselves to the pagans like some sort of Sabrina version of Endgame. With the pagans on the run, Roz and Harvey go after the Gorgon, Sycorax, who in mythology is actually Caliban's mother, but it's never really mentioned in the show. She's a Gorgon like Medusa, with the ability to turn anyone who looks at her to stone. This is why Harvey goes in holding a mirror, kind of a loophole to not be affected by her powers. But when his mirror gets smashed, he's saved by Roz, who really should have gone in the first place, since her cunning ability would have allowed her to see without opening her eyes. In another act of revenge, Hilda is savage as completely contorting Cersei more than a Cirque du Soleil performer. And Hilda is rightfully angry. It was Cersei who put a spell on her that made her gradually transform into a spider, which resulted in the death of her true love, Dr. Cerberus. This is what happens when you get in the way of a woman who is supposed to audition for Sweeney Todd. But as we'll find out later, Dr. C is alive and well, having been wrapped up in a cocoon but not eaten. And finally, we have the god of the Pan-Flute. In ancient Greek mythology, Pan was the god of the wild. His name is where we actually get the word panic from. He actually doesn't have much time to play some sweet tunes since he's stabbed by Prudence. Back at home, we have a really important scene with the Spellmans, which outlines Sabrina's journey and arc not just through this season, but through all three. Sabrina says being the queen of hell is her destiny, something in previous seasons she said she would never do. Zelda also thanks Sabrina for putting the coven and her family first, when previously she was chastised by Zelda for choosing the opposite.
Can you believe this, Hilda? Your niece, chose a throne in hell over her coven and her family.
But there's still something Sabrina must do. Sabrina promised the future Sabrina that she'd come back and end this time loop. But Sabrina has a plan that will both end the time loop and solve her biggest dilemma. How can she be both Queen of Hell and a regular teenager? To understand this, we need to track our Sabrinas. First, we have what I like to call future Sabrina, who is still trapped in stone and was the one who helped present Sabrina change the course of history. Since present Sabrina was successful and changed history, this means there's no more future Sabrina, because that part of the future now never happened. Present Sabrina then informs new Sabrina not to fall for Caliban's trick, thereby stopping him from coming into power and continuing the time loop. The two Sabrinas, in secret, come to an agreement that present Sabrina will live in Greendale. After all, she spent decades in stone and saw the skeletons of all her loved ones, while new Sabrina will live her life as Queen of Hell. With Hell finally stabilized with its new queen, the realms of heaven, hell, and earth are finally stable. But for how long? Back in Greendale, Robin says he's going to stay, and it's heavily hinted that Harvey finally loses his V card. Prudence and Ambrose seemingly end their relationship when Prudence, upset over the death of her sister Dorcas, blames Ambrose since he was the one to stop her from killing Blackwood when they had the chance in Scotland. If Ambrose had never stopped her, none of this would have ever happened, and Dorcas would still be alive. Zelda proclaims that the Church of Night is now the Order of Hecate, and Mambo Marie, who is offered a place to teach at the academy, tells her she senses something is in the air, and that they must prepare for war. Before they kiss, of course. With Sabrina as queen, the season begins to wrap up, leaving us with many possibilities as to what will happen in season 4, and the ending of this season gives us a few clues. First, we have Nick and Prudence, both of whom have left their partners, finally reuniting. I think it's safe to assume that these two will end up being a couple, especially considering that Sabrina lit that candle to stop her feelings towards both Nick and Harvey. But if there's anything we know about spells in Sabrina land, it's that almost anything can be reversed. I also think the introduction of Marie as a love interest for Zelda means we'll be getting more voodoo magic next season in the fight against Faustus and the Eldritch Terror. I'll get into Faustus in a bit. The two Sabrinas leave us with crazy possibilities as to what will happen, but it's Ambrose who gives us a clue that things can't go on this way, not to mention the bad omen of the cuckoo clock falling. Ambrose tells Sabrina that she has created a time paradox, the ramifications of which are horrifying, and as Sabrina even said to her family, the universe has a way of correcting itself. If anyone is to discover the two Sabrina's plans, it's likely Lilith.
Lilith notices everything.
Lilith could be a problem. Yeah.
And let's not forget that Lilith is supposedly pregnant with Lucifer's child, a male heir. She got this by doing the dirty with Faustus, who had Lucifer within him when he was his flesh Acheron. It will be interesting if a male heir will change Lucifer's mind as to who will share the throne with him. Finally, we have the cliffhanger ending where Faustus, along with Agatha, Judith, and Judas, unleashes the egg creature into the world, calling upon the Eldritch Terror to make him a vessel. The Eldritch Terrors are said to predate even the old gods, with the ability to change space and time. This hints that time travel, or perhaps even different versions of reality, will come into play more next season. But what exactly is this egg? Obtained by Faustus by what seems to be the Loch Ness Monster, though unconfirmed in the credits, is some sort of alien fetus which can bend time. The term Eldritch was popularized by author H.P. Lovecraft for a creature that disregards the laws of the universe, and in many horror stories, it's referred to as an alien who lives outside the dawn of time. Let's also not forget that Faustus was imbued with the mark of Cain, making him invincible and doubly threatening to both hell and earth. Knowing this show, however, nothing is ever invincible. Everything always has a weakness. Along with Faustus being a villain, there's also the potential that Queen of Hell Sabrina could be swayed to the dark side, influenced by both Lilith and Lucifer. This means that we could see Greendale Sabrina fighting an evil version of herself. Of course, there isn't a release date yet for part 4, but stay tuned to my channel by liking and subscribing for all the latest Sabrina updates. I got all sorts of cool videos on the horizon, so stay tuned. Let me know what you thought of the season below in the comments, and until next time, remember,
Call me